Hello, and welcome to the 9th edition of the Globe and Mail Craft Club. I'm Jana Pruden. I'm a crime reporter and a feature writer at the Globe and Mail, and in these strange times, I am also hosting our pandemic pop-up craft club. So welcome to our regulars, or if you're joining us for the first time, hello. It's so great to have you here with us tonight. A reminder that all of our previous classes and this class will be available and are there to watch anytime at our handy dandy link, tgam.ca/craftclub. You can also connect with us on our Facebook page, Globe Craft Club, and subscribe to the Globe and Mail's Parenting and Relationships newsletter, which always has updates of classes we've just done and classes that are coming up. And of course, I always encourage people to subscribe to the Globe and Mail. We have an amazing sale on right now. I'm a little bit old-fashioned, so I still like to get the paper in print. And I reuse my paper all the time underneath my craft projects, making collages or paper mache. In fact, just this weekend, I pulped up some old papers to make seed bombs for my backyard. So subscribe, and you also support our journalism and, the organization that allows me to be here with you offering these classes, which have been, for me, so much fun these past few months. I'm really excited to get started with our class tonight, but before we do, I do have some special announcements. So this craft club was originally intended to be 6 classes, and our thought was, that'll get us through this winter that was pretty difficult for a lot of people, and it'll be a really fun thing to do. We were about 4 or 5 in, and we knew, okay, well, we're not going to be out of the woods at 6. So then we changed it to 10. This is number 9 of our 10-part series. So my first big announcement is that our guest for our next class, which is on May 25th, is going to be Raffikat Oyawe Salame. And probably many of you know that she's the recent winner of season 4 of the Canadian Baking Show. Raffikat was just an all-around favorite. Everybody I know who was watching this show absolutely loved her. I'm pretty sure a lot of the contestants that she was competing with also wanted her to win. Please don't tell Larry, who's our Edmonton hometown guy, but I too was pulling for Raffikat. So she's going to be here teaching us a scone recipe that she's developed. You can watch for the ingredient list next week, and that's going to be the evening of May 25th. And I think that's going to be just a really fun class. Second, due to popular demand, we have decided to extend the craft club throughout the summer. Now, we realize maybe not everyone wants to spend their beautiful summer evenings at home inside crafting, so we're going to go down to 1 class per month, but that does mean there's going to be 3 more classes, and then it will be fall, and hopefully we will have this virus under control more than we do now, and hopefully we'll be vaccinated, maybe being able to visit our friends and families, and even craft together in person. And then I will go back to my regular crime reporting and as a full-time job, and craft as a hobby on the weekends. But until then, I am here at my dining room table, which I have to say, I've basically taken over for the past few months. And I was thinking today, I wonder where everybody crafts. So that's something you can put in the comments. Let us know where you're working. If you have a beautiful craft room of your own, maybe don't tell me, because I might be too envious. And I'm so excited to introduce our guest tonight. I don't know if he's in his dining room or has his own room. We'll ask him. I have been a huge fan of Tom Brown's work for a long time. So this was just an absolute thrill for me to be able to ask him and for him to say yes. So it's really my pleasure to welcome Tom Brown, very renowned Calgary artist and miniaturist, to our craft club tonight. Hi, Tom.
Hi, Jana. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction.
Well, I was telling you before we started that my mother-in-law turns out to be a huge fan of miniatures, and she was admiring your work on Instagram. That's at Tom Brown Creates. I really encourage you to go down this little tiny rabbit hole of big things that Tom makes. And she sent me a text last night saying, Tom Brown is a genius, and was very excited about your work. For those who aren't familiar with it yet, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you got into crafting yourself, into miniatures yourself, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that crafting is part of the wide variety of creative practices that people have. But my start as a creative person, a maker, a crafter, came when I was quite young, actually, and I was taught the lessons of basically how to whittle safely by my uncle Chris, and he gave me just basically all the skills that I needed in order to start working with my hands and start making things. And so I had these skills. I was armed with the skills of whittling, and this knife right here, actually, my first whittling knife. And so I just went out into the world and started finding materials, finding supplies. And I had this really strong desire to make a guitar. I really wanted a guitar. So I went out into my front yard and I found all the wood that I could find and set about with my little knife trying to make a guitar. And I did. The only problem was that it was about that big. So obviously not something that I would be able to play, but something that awoke a passion for making miniatures in me. And I spent basically the majority of my childhood making miniatures, replicating all the different things that were around me in my life. And it sparked a lifelong creative pursuit.
It's amazing to me. We obviously have this real attraction to miniatures, and I see it, when I look at your work, when other people look at your work, it's like sometimes you make a really high-pitched sound, like, ee! It's so cute. I think when you sent me the picture of our project today, I sent it out to the team with something that was very much like, ee! That is really intriguing to us. Why do you think that we have this? In theory, it shouldn't really matter that much that something is the same, but just really tiny. What do you think it is that draws us to miniatures?
You know what? That's a really good question, and I feel like that's something that I've been trying to answer for my whole creative career. Every time I meet another miniature maker, I always ask them, "What is it about miniature that you're so drawn to?" And everybody has a different answer. But to me, I think it really has something to do with the way that it awakens that sort of creativity that brings me back to my childhood and the creativity of my childhood. The idea of playing with a toy. I always wanted the toys to work when I was a kid. And then when I became an adult and I went to art school, which I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to do, I basically discovered that miniature can also be used as a discipline of art for saying a lot of the things that people say in painting and sculpture, in fiber, in ceramic art, that you can have a fully fledged practice in miniature. And I really think that there's just something magical about it. It's improbable, and it awakens a spark of imagination in people.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd love to talk more, but I think we should also get started on our project. Do you want to talk a little bit about the supplies you have in front of you there?
Certainly, yeah. So the supplies for our project today, I have sort of two different scales of project. And my objective with this was to design something that everybody can do, and then show you how to take those skills and apply them to a slightly more difficult project. So to begin with, we'll be using these two pieces of material. So we have our soda can and our popsicle stick. And the primary tool that we will use for this stage are our scissors. And I have my collection of all of my different whittling knives laid out here, just to show that there's an option of a range of possibilities that would work. You could use your X-Acto knife, a multi-tool, any kind of carving knife, right up to a kitchen knife would work just fine for this. And just as a little bonus here, I've included as an example of my work some of my miniature replicas of these tools. So this is my miniature Leatherman and my miniature Swiss Army knife.
They astound me every time. I've literally spent hours looking at your Instagram and watching your videos, and these projects astound me every time. I wonder, can you hold it even closer up to the camera?
Yes,
They're
absolutely.
so little. Oh, that's perfect. And what you may see at home, these are all functional items. That's what's so amazing about them. You know, when Tom makes a Leatherman, a Swiss Army knife, a Bodum coffee maker, they all work. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Exactly. And so beyond that, so basically the skills that I learned about whittling, and it's all about working safely. So that's kind of the priority, and something that I want to highlight tonight is giving you the skills to sort of begin to work in miniature and work safely. And so the first lesson that I was taught was to always cut away from yourself, never cut towards yourself. And so we're gonna begin tonight cutting away from ourselves using our kitchen knife, or if you don't feel quite comfortable with that, you can use a pair of scissors for this step. And we're going to open up our soda can. So we're just going to puncture it just like that, keeping our fingers nice and clear.
We can do this with the knife too?
You can do this with the knife or with the scissors, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I think that was not away from me at all. That was definitely towards me. Maybe you can demonstrate for people like me once more how to do it away from yourself.
Certainly. So my focus with that would be keeping my hands well clear on this side, keeping this hand well clear, and pushing down. Don't push at an angle at all this way. Really just push down and just pop through like that. And it should go through smoothly. And once we've opened up this hole here, we can take our scissors and work them into the puncture. And we're just going to cut a circumference around the can to just separate this bottom part from the rest of the can.
Okay. And should we go all the way around to cut it off?
Go all the way around.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Cut it right off.
Oh, and mine seemingly has a bit of fizzy water still in the left of it, in the bottom of it, that it has leaked.
That's okay. Mine has a little bit as well, but it shouldn't matter.
There is a question about injuries that you have incurred making your pieces. Have you cut yourself with that little tiny knife?
Countless times, yeah, absolutely. I have a first aid kit right here in my studio, and it has seen a lot of use. But as I get older, I get a little smarter every year. So another safety consideration here, now that we've cut this, we have a very sharp metal edge. And so we will employ that same logic and work away from the metal edge with our fingers. So I'm not going to hold it ever on the metal edge. I'm going to hold it on a safe part. And just continuing to use the scissors, I'm just going to start cutting around the can, taking about that much off, just trying to work at removing material, basically.
So are we trying to get as close as possible to this sort of little lip at the bottom?
Exactly, yeah. So there's a little lip, and then we will work our way all the way into this lip eventually. But we want to work, we don't want to take off too much at once, or our scissors will get stuck in the can. So we're going to work taking off, that's about 1 centimeter right there. So just 1 centimeter wide strip, and work our way down until you will notice that you hit a slightly thicker part of the can right at the bottom.
Okay. And I do have some smaller scissors because I've been crafting and my whole dining room table is full of crafting supplies. I do have smaller scissors. It seems like maybe the smaller ones are a better option.
The smaller might work better. You can make the big ones work if you just cut with the tip. But if you try to use the whole blade, it will be just a little bit too long for the shape of the can.
Okay. I sort of like this element of danger. It goes back to our roots here at Craft Club. Our first or second class when we made soap, and I was pretty worried about burning myself with lye. So just adds a little element of excitement.
Well, it helps you focus too. I find that when you're working and there are the stakes of danger, it really keeps you very present. It keeps you very attentive and focused on what you're doing. So I don't mind a little bit of danger.
This is where my crime reporting and my crafting collide.
I hope not. Not tonight.
Just the sense of danger sometimes.
Exactly, yeah.
So I definitely have some little, you know, it's not as clean as yours.
That's perfectly fine. Yeah, we're just attempting to remove material right now. So once we've kind of got down to this thicker part, you may find that it's a little more difficult to cut. And what we actually want to do is just cut it around, but we're just going to cut straight lines. So instead of trying to go all the way around, start trimming the lines off. And you don't want to cut past. So there's this lip right here that kind of creates the ridge on the bottom of the can.
Yep.
That corner right there is our guide. So we want to try to cut right up to there. Try not to go past there.
Okay.
And so I'm just going to go and work my way around. We can cut and chat while we work this material off.
And you're holding it with the bottom side up, okay?
Exactly, yeah. You could hold it this way as well. I don't know that there's necessarily a better or worse way to do it.
Right. So you're almost cutting it like an octagon idea.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, straight lines. It just makes this part a little easier to cut because you'll notice that if you try to cut a curve on this part, your scissors start to get stuck, and that's when, I feel like that's when things start to go wrong.
Yeah. So one thing that often comes up, I've found talking about miniatures, is that, you know, a miniaturist must have very steady hands and really good eyesight. Is that true?
I think patience is the key attribute there, because steady hands, sometimes my hands are very steady and sometimes my eyesight is good, but sometimes I make catastrophic errors when I'm working on something and absolutely destroy the thing that I'm working on. And patience really is the key there. And I think that probably if you've crafted in your life, you've had experiences very similar to that, where something didn't go the way that you were hoping it would. And, you know, you had to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and maybe cry a little bit and then get back to work. But that has certainly happened to me. So I've worked enough material off. You can see I still have some edges, but I've worked enough off to where I can start to cut and just try to follow the shape of the bottom ridge all the way around the can. Okay. Just try to cut the neatest circle that you can.
I feel like patience and perfection are they're really important attributes for they're challenges for me. I guess I struggle with patience, and then that I want things to be perfect, which they are not always.
Well, I find that for me that perfection really is perfection is a fleeting and elusive thing, but it really is a product of failure, in my opinion, that you don't succeed to an end result of perfection, that you actually fail over and over again until you've reached a point of perfection. And I've learned that lesson many, many times over and over again.
Can you hold that up a little closer to the camera just so we can see? Okay, perfect. So mine's not quite there yet. Maybe you can tell people, I've been reading about your, I read the journey of your miniature espresso maker. I mean, this truly is remarkable. I don't know how you did it. Everyone that I send it to is, their mind is blown. It's an espresso maker. It does steam milk. It makes a little tiny espresso that even gets a little bit of crema on it. Oh, there it is. Amazing. This thing just blows my mind. But you were telling me how long it took you, and this was not something that immediately was perfect. Do you want to just talk a little bit about the process that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the espresso maker, and I feel like it's a great example of working in miniature and the process-based nature of it, that I had I originally had the desire to make an espresso maker 5 or 6 years ago, and I tried a couple times and it never quite worked out. And I finally had, I had the free time of COVID that some people have had, the desire to craft. And so I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make this. And I set out initially figuring out how espresso makers work. I built a boiler. I took the boiler apart. I put it back together, and I did that, 20 or 30 times probably before the boiler got to the point where it worked. And then building the shell, getting everything put together, and having it, firing it up for the first time and having it explode in my hands, and having to take it apart and put it all back together again. You really learn very fast not to be precious with your work and to accept when something has failed, because you now have a chance to make it succeed.
Amazing. Yeah. I feel like that's why, there are so many things about making, whether it's, fine art, whether it's crafting, whether it's a little hobby, whether it's something we sell, but that there's so many lessons in there that are actually really big lessons about life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
And I really encourage all of you to look at Tom's Instagram at Tom Brown Creates. If you scroll back, you can see him making a little tiny cappuccino or latte with that with that very machine. So mine is not perfect yet, but it's mostly
That's pretty good. Yeah, I think you're close enough to where we can start work on the next phase.
Perfect.
Where we will be using our sandpaper. So. Okay. We'll grab our sandpaper, and the first thing that we're going to do with it is use it just to take the sharp edge off of this side.
Okay.
And you will also notice that, Jenna, if you have any imperfections or little corners, they will kind of get rounded out in this stage. So your scissor cutting doesn't have to be perfect.
So one other thing that you do, or a big thing that you do, and I think how I first heard about you is I saw a news story about this, is that you have a fully functioning little tiny kitchen with 200 different pieces in it, and you take it out into the world. Okay, there it is. There's the star. And when it's possible, when it was possible, when it is possible, you take it out in the world, and you actually make miniature meals for people, fully edible, delicious.
That's right.
Meals.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how. So that's kind of how my my adult passion for miniatures was reawakened, was through the miniature kitchen, and it was. I guess it was in my final year going to ACAD, now AU Arts here in Calgary, that I had been working in like large scale sculpture and doing all these things, but nothing quite clicked for me. And I guess it was one day I was actually going through a door, and I had kind of this memory of working in miniature when I was a kid. And so I started building the kitchen, and it just, it just took on a life of its own. I started doing performances with it at school, and since then it has taken me to, it's taken me all around the world. I've been to South Africa with it. I've been all throughout the States. I've done so many performances here in Calgary. I've done miniature dinner parties, all different kinds of things. And what I really like about it is, I really love cooking for people in human scale and in real life scale. I really love hanging out with people in the kitchen, and my miniature kitchen is a version of that sort of social environment that I can take with me anywhere and set it up and have my kitchen there and have people join me in my kitchen. And it really, I have to say, it really works. Whenever I'm out in public and people come and sit with me during one of my performances, we have the best conversations. It's quite nice.
And how do people usually respond? Like, if someone's, okay, what's that guy doing? And then they get close and you're making like a tiny pierogi dinner from scratch.
Exactly. They usually laugh. Like, I think that they're dumbfounded would be the right way to put it. A lot of people, I think, ask the question, why? And I don't really have a good answer for them, but I guess because it brings me joy, and I've had the chance to share it with others, and they've told me that it does the same for them. But laughter, I would say laughter, skepticism for sure. I'm often met with a healthy amount of skepticism, which I think is only fair.
We have a comment from Kelly Glasner. She says, I checked out his work earlier. It's unbelievable.
Oh, thank you.
And Janet Brown marveling at so many coffee options. Oh, that's your mom. Oh,
Yeah.
Hi, Tom's mom. We all think your son is a genius. Everyone's very impressed. She must be very proud, I'm sure.
I hope so.
So Oh, sorry. Just a reminder to everyone at home. I often, when we don't have lots of questions, it's because everyone's working. So I think that's a great thing. And I'm happy to ask. I'm a reporter. I always have lots of questions. But just a reminder to anyone watching, if you have questions for Tom, definitely put them in the chat and we will.
Please do.
Okay, sorry.
So I've finished sanding the circumference of my bowl here. And this it's quite smooth, dull, and it's quite uniform. And what I'm going to do now is actually just sand the inside of this here. You can see there's just some ink. So just sanding kind of enough to remove that.
Okay.
And it works really well if you actually just hold it and kind of spin the bowl under your thumb.
So I just used whatever sandpaper we had, which is pretty fine. Do you have a preference of what you would do with this normally? What sandpaper?
I find that the most, probably the most all-purpose sandpaper in my mind is 150 grit. Okay. And then as it wears out, it gets progressively finer, but I have everything from 40 to 3000 for working on my projects. But yeah, you can pretty much use whatever you have. I feel like for this project, it's not of critical importance. So I've got my, ink all removed in the inside of the bowl there. Looking good. And what I'm going to do next is actually just flip the bowl upside down. And you can use pretty much any sort of cylindrical object for this step, but I've just got a Sharpie or a pen or anything that's kind of similar to that. You could use the bottom of your knife or, and then I'm just going to go in the center there and press just hard enough to make a dimple in the bowl.
Okay.
There we go.
So just a little dimple. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just about that size right there. And then that just creates a flat bottom for the bowl to sit on.
Cute.
Mm-hmm. And so that's the bowl finished.
Amazing.
And I think that that was a fairly simple activity in my mind, but it's a really good example of the mindset that I have working in miniature, where you kind of look at the things you have around you and you start to see them in a different way. You think, how can I use that to make a miniature? So the bottom of a pop can is a fairly simple miniature bowl that works perfectly if you want to try experimenting with making your own miniature food in your kitchen. It's a lot of fun. I would highly recommend it. But I would also recommend looking at the things around you and asking yourself, well, what can I do with that? Like, is there a possibility for that to be transformed into a miniature?
Well, and it's funny because after we spoke, I got really jazzed up on miniatures. And so first of all, I made a little using Catalina's notebook technique that she taught us a few years ago, or a few months ago, felt like years, months. Catalina Sanchez's notebook technique and Danielle's hand lettering technique. So I made a little teeny weeny Globe Craft Club notebook. And then, put in class number 7, Tom Brown miniature.
Amazing.
And then that was so fun that I actually made a couple of little tiny books and little bookmarks, super easy, where I printed out. So of course I chose all books that have Little in the title. So there's the Prince and Stuart Little. And then I went and put them in our little free library in our neighborhood. So they're gone. Someone did take them, but it was really interesting to think about after talking to Tom and feeling sort of inspired by that, of just how easily you can look at something around your house and turn it into something.
Absolutely. And so I just noted that we had a question in the chat about what's the most difficult thing that I've ever made. And I would say kind of everything has been, when I was making it, the most difficult thing that I've ever made. But I just wanted to show these miniature glasses. So this is a miniature cut crystal goblet. And this is a technique that I've been working really hard on, is learning glass blowing and making these miniature glasses. And I have made over 200 failed attempts and about 20 successful ones. So that's just sort of an example of something that is highly difficult to make that I've been working on.
How do you do it? How do you?
So I actually have a lot of the supplies for it right here, but these are just these are like drinking straws, I guess, glass drinking straws, and you heat them in a torch with a silicone tube connected to one end that you blow in. And so you basically use that tube to, under heat, shape the closed end of the straw to create the shape that you want, and then you kind of cut it off halfway and connect it to the base. So I'll just see if we can get a nice close-up shot of glass.
It's amazing. Just amazing. I mean, so when we talk about that kind of challenge, sometimes it's easy to say like, oh, just try it again. But when you're talking about, you know, dozens and dozens of failures, one after the other, is there no point where you just think like, okay, no, that's enough, I can't do it? Or do you ever give up? Have you ever given up a project?
Only ever temporarily. I feel like even the projects that I have right now where I've said that I can't do that, all of the things that I can think of in the past where I've said that and I've gone on to make them. I mean, here's a great example, just sitting right beside me. So I've really also been wanting to make miniature bottles, and this was my first attempt right here. And I don't know if you can see, it's cracked and it's ashy, like it's got, I overheated the glass, so I burned the glass, and it's got all these bubbles in it. Wasn't a great attempt. This second try, which is totally rippled, and the top got all weird, and I actually got a little pinhole, and I put this aside for a year because I was like, I can't do it. It's impossible. And came back to it just recently, and I feel like just the letting time pass and practicing that I figured it out. So I would encourage you, that's sort of the number one thing. If you really are feeling like I can't do this, take a break and come back to it when you have sort of a fresh mind and a renewed sense of optimism.
Mm-hmm. Again, I think those are really good life lessons and things for all of us to keep in mind, whether we're crafting or, you know, working. Question from Isaac: do you ever sell any of your work, and where could I go to buy something?
Absolutely. So everything is through my Instagram page. You can find it all there. When I do sell work, it is typically through there or through my Etsy page, which you can find on my website, which is www.tombrowncreates.com. It's all Tom Brown Creates everywhere. And I appreciate the question. So I think that we should talk about the wooden spoon. So you can see that I have two different spoons that I've prepared for this here. And they represent two different techniques of making. And this one really represents an entry point into woodworking. And then this one is sort of taking those skills and applying them to a slightly fancier, more complex spoon. And I just want to take us through the process of how I made both of these so that everybody who's watching at home can do it for themselves. And we're going to start with this spoon, for which we will need our popsicle stick and our scissors. And so this is my attempt to make the easiest possible woodworking task that I could, using the least amount of tools. So it is truly just the scissors. So the first stage, what I'm going to do is basically just pick the length of how long I would like my spoon to be. And that's sort of up to you, but I would say long enough so that if the tip is in the bowl, the handle sticks out. So I'm going to pick about right there, and just notch on one side, flip it over and notch it on the other side.
Okay.
And with both of those notches, we should be able to just snap it off right there. Oh, mine went a little high.
I didn't get a clean break, but I feel like it's still possible.
Yeah, that's okay. It's not critical at this stage. So we have the basic blank of our spoon. And the next thing that we want to do is create two similar notches that start to define the shape of the, I guess, the bowl of your spoon. So I'm going to go right here. And just create a notch like that. And I'm going to create a similar one on the other side as well. Again, cutting away from myself, I noticed that I had my finger right there, right in the path of the blade. So I'm going to hold it from the back of the spoon. And now we have these two notches defined. And we should be able to go just to the top of the spoon and working lengthwise down the spoon, create another series of notches that if you're lucky and you have a good grain in your popsicle stick, should just split right down to there. And you should be able to just peel that piece off. You see, I got a nice piece right there after I worked through a knot in the wood. Do that on the other side.
So there's a question about scale. Mm-hmm. Someone is asking, I've bought dollhouse stuff that's 1/12, but this person read that you do 1/6 scale. What does that mean for those of us that don't know about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So 1/12 scale is a bit more typical for dollhouse scale. I feel like it's a little bit more common in the miniature world, but I prefer 1/6 scale because it has just a little bit more of a relationship to human use. And I do use all of my tools or I guess the ones that I make for the kitchen are all to be used and to be consumed. And 1/6 was just that sweet spot in my mind between being really small enough that it was sort of strange, otherworldly experience, and not so small that it was sort of beyond the human body's ability to taste or experience. And so we are working in 1/6 scale right now. This is a 1/6 bowl. That just means that it's roughly 6:1 scale. So 6 times larger, and it would be your metal mixing bowl in your kitchen, maybe.
So I had a problem that it's kind of, well, I abandoned one already. Like popsicle sticks are not made of gold. So I abandoned one, but the problem was that as I was cutting the notch in, it really kind of split. Yep. So what happens when that happens?
If it really does split, then I think that you had the right approach there, where you kind of have to abandon that spoon and try again. I think the other thing is to take smaller chunks off. So take small bites. Take just a little notch there and split a little bit down this way. Take another notch and split again. Not try to take too much off at any one time, but you'll see that I have had a split with the grain of my wood right there as well. So I will just have to work more slowly in that area and try to just shave it off as I move past there, so that I'm not working into the grain of the wood. That is one of the challenges of working with wood, is that the grain will sometimes just not let you do what you want with that piece, unfortunately.
So we talked about, using things around the house or using found objects. You find a lot of your supplies, where? You can tell us. Where are you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I find a great deal of my supplies actually are repurposed from back alleys, that people often leave things that they feel they no longer have a use for, that I see in a back alley, and I can see sort of 1,001 uses for them. Printers are great. They have so many different little motors and different little sort of bits and bobs. I took apart a broken sewing machine once, well in my past, that I'm still using up materials from. I have right here an in-process martini shaker that I'm working on, which you may be able to identify what material that was made out of. It's a bullet casing.
A bullet?
Yeah. So it really is when you're working in miniature, kind of a matter of finding something that is almost already the thing that you're trying to make, and just adapting it those final few steps. I use a lot of thimbles. I use a lot of old baking pans to harvest the aluminum from them because it's a very soft metal that you can shape, very much like we did with our bowls. And I'm just going to interject here and sort of talk about the spoon. So I've kind of got my spoon basically to this stage. It's still a little bit wider than the finished product, but we're not going to cut anymore. What we're going to start doing is just using our scissors, scraping up the side of the shaft of the spoon and just starting to shape it that way. So I can start to round the corners. I can get it all nice and straight.
Going away from ourselves.
Exactly.
And
cutting away from ourselves.
You're holding the paddle of the spoon.
Exactly. So I'm holding the paddle of the spoon. I do have my finger right here.
Yeah.
And so that is actually sort of the hook of cutting away from yourself. The lesson that I learned, the very first lesson in working and how to work safely, always cut away from yourself. That it didn't take me long of whittling to discover that sometimes you have to cut towards yourself.
Right.
And learning how to do that safely, but taking chances is always a part of the creative process. But you really have to, you have to weigh the risks to never take a chance that will harm you beyond repair. But if you're willing to, you may cut yourself in the pursuit of creating something, which I have many, many times, I promise.
I think everybody watching this live stream has probably, burned themselves with a glue gun, poked themselves with a needle a few times.
Oh, yeah. It's experience points.
Yes. So it just so happens when we talked about the supplies, I had everything around the house except for popsicle sticks. So I thought, oh, well, maybe I'll buy some popsicles and I'll eat a popsicle and then I'll use a stick. And then that day I was walking in the forest and I found a pile of popsicle sticks. They were glued together. Gosh. Obviously, someone had made maybe like a birdhouse or something and it had died. And so they all looked clean and good. And I picked up a little piece of it and pulled off the glue sticks or glue blobs. And here I am reusing it.
Well, and that's so interesting because that is something that I find happening more often than not with miniatures is that you need something and you set an intention to find it and it will come to you. So many times in back alleys, I have found the exact thing that I was looking for in an almost improbable fashion, much like you're describing there, Jana. And like just for those who have shaped and scraped their spoon, you can start to use sandpaper as well to really round out the corners and get rid of all of the runs and ragged edges on the wood.
Mine's a little wonky looking. I think we'd call it rustic. It's faux art right now.
Exactly. Well, is it the first time that you've ever carved a spoon?
Yes.
Then it's amazing. And you're learning.
That's right. It's true. A question from Joanne. What is the smallest thing you've ever made? And are there any world records for the tiniest miniature that you might try to accomplish?
That's a great question. I actually do have something on hand here that will possibly not even be possible to see for everybody. But this is a pending Guinness World Record attempt for the world's smallest functional mousetrap.
What, Tom?
The issue is that in order to finish the application, I have to hold a public demonstration. And so coronavirus has put the hold on that. But as soon as COVID's over, I will be proving my record. And it is currently about 1 by 2 millimeters smaller than the current world record.
Here's a good question. Can the Globe get exclusive coverage of this attempt?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I'm definitely coming down from Edmonton for that. But where are you going to get a mouse that small?
Oh, that's a great question. I might, the joke that I was making for a long time was that I was trying to catch COVID with it. So be careful.
That's pretty good. That's amazing. Wow. Okay. So here's a question, and I'm going to hold mine up really close so you can see. So mine's a little bit wonky. The two sides of the spoon, you can see right here, it's not even. So is that something I should try to whittle off more? Is that something that I should sandpaper off? What do you think?
Yeah, so if you want to get a little bit deeper into the corners, what I would suggest is that you could whittle, and you could kind of maybe take slightly more of a cut as opposed to a scrape.
Okay.
And that will help you start to take some little pieces off. But the other thing that you can do, and what I see with the shape of your spoon there, is holding the shaft from the other side and scraping back in the other direction. And that will help you even it out, because if you only scrape one way, you do sometimes end up creating dips and shapes on this side that can only be solved by coming at it from this side.
Okay.
So to work in both directions. And then the other thing, Jana, I just noticed that you were carving back into the tip of your spoon like this.
Yeah.
And that's one of the big no-nos with wood, because you're going to be going into the grain of the wood and potentially splitting up this way. So instead of working into the grain, we always want to try to work across or with the grain. So we'll work down this way into the corner, and then that way we won't be in danger of splitting the paddle of our spoon.
Okay, great advice. Thank you.
And for those who are sort of at the stage where they've sanded it and are happy with the profile of their spoon, what I would invite you to do next is, and I have sort of rounded tip scissors here, which are very useful for this step. But if you don't have rounded tip scissors, you can also use a smaller knife that has a bit more of a profile to it like that. But what I'm going to do is just start scraping the surface to create the bowl, the impression on the spoon. And I find that it doesn't really matter how sharp your scissors are or the tip of what you're using. It is quite a soft wood. Popsicles are made of spruce, so they will, they will give.
So you just using the tip of the spoon, or sorry, the tip of the scissors?
Yeah, exactly. I'm just kind of using the tip of the scissors, or if I only have scissors with a hard edge on the tip, you can also just use the tip of a knife and begin to just scrape the inside of the spoon.
And are you just kind of chipping away? I'm sort of just chipping it away.
Yeah, basically, just chipping away, and it doesn't matter how accurate you are at the start. You're just kind of trying to create a basic rough profile of a spoon that we can refine once we've kind of removed a little bit of material.
And I've just skipped ahead to this step. Even though my shape isn't perfect, I figure I can go back to the shape, right?
Exactly, yeah. And now I'm not going to go too deep on mine there. I'm just kind of creating. So you can see it's not very deep. It's just enough to create the visual impression of it. So as I tilt my spoon slightly, it's catching a shadow. And I feel like when you're working in miniature, things often don't have to be exactly perfect to look good.
Right.
And I'm going to use my sandpaper then just to take out the high points that I created. I'll maybe just fold a corner of it over and use the tip of it right there.
So you were at one point working full-time as an artist and miniaturist. Now you are studying. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'm studying at the University of Calgary for my master's in landscape architecture. I feel like you may think, but wait, isn't that a departure from the miniature? And it is. It's definitely on a bit of a different scale, but I've been, I've also all this time while working in miniature, I've been passionate about my garden, and it's been a really interesting experience because I find all of the creative lessons that I learned in my artistic career are absolutely relevant to the work that I'm doing right now. And I think that is really one of the nice things about being a creative person and exploring creativity and learning through the process, is that the lessons you learn really are applicable in almost every field of life.
So your mother is watching the live stream. Is that where you got some of your creativity from?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. My mom went to Sheridan College, I believe, and got her a diploma in fashion design. And all through my childhood was, so just a question about the sandpaper I saw there. So I have 150 grit. I also have some 400 grit out on the table. But any sandpaper really will do at this point. I will show you how to get a nice finish, even if you have coarse sandpaper. But we're just using it to take down the high points right now.
I'm using a thin or a pretty fine sandpaper. I feel like I could use a bit more grit.
Yeah, that's definitely a possibility. I feel like if you're in the hundreds, you're removing a little bit more material. Once you're up beyond 200, 300, 400, you're really going to refine the surface a little bit more. But I feel like it's also okay. It will just take you a little bit longer, Jana.
Yeah.
But yeah, my mom was creating all through my childhood. My dad as well. My dad paints, and so I had a lot of really good creative role models. I learned a lot of lessons in woodworking from my grandfather as well. I was really given a lot of sort of support and encouragement to pursue my creative goals. Oh, well, there we go. There's an example of having a really nice finished spoon and having it break. So another one bites the dust, I guess, but that's okay, ultimately.
Sometimes we break our big mixing spoons too.
Exactly, yeah. That's very true.
So with something like that, would you glue it back together, or do you just consider that?
I mean, this is a pretty clean break, so I would probably just usually just super glue it back together. Very, very frequent material in my studio. I would say it's rare that a project doesn't need a little bit of super glue to hold it together at some point. So I guess that's the other thing, is that if something does break, you often can fix it, and not to be, not to cry over a broken spoon. There we go. That is new.
That spoon is looking fantastic.
Thank you. Just clean up a little bit for the next step of this craft club here.
I hope everybody can see your screen right now. This is from Kelly again. Skills transfer, Tom Brown, of course.
Exactly.
Look at Jana and all of us from so many different backgrounds. Very cool. And that it is so cool. I can't believe, on Facebook page. I can't believe all of the things that people are making. And even when we all make the same things, it's so cool to see the different interpretations and personality that people bring to, even when we're all doing essentially the same project.
Absolutely. And that's something that is really true in creative disciplines, that you have your accepted solutions and sort of your accepted techniques. And there may be a much better way of doing something that is the common practice of another, another creative discipline, that it just takes that collaboration to learn. And that a lot of closed creative doors, you can miss those opportunities. But something like this, the ability to share this as you have with so many people and so many different types of crafting, I think is really a nice way to bring those different skills to bear and those different knowledge bases.
It's definitely been a lot of fun. And as we learned tonight, sometimes you can build a better, or at least smaller, stuff.
Exactly.
Take that old adage.
Uh-huh.
So should I still be sanding, or are we moving on?
Well, if you're happy with where your spoon's at, so the only reason that I've stopped sanding is because I'm I'm happy with where my spoon's at. Just hold it up so everyone can see it. It'll do the trick. Yeah. And you can, if you want, you can continue sanding your spoon for as long as you want. You could try to get it perfectly cylindrical right here. You could profile the back of this part. You could try to get the bowl as deep as you wanted. You could use other tools. Maybe you can think of a better way of doing it than what I shared. But for now, I think that this looks good.
Okay. I'll put mine aside and go back to it later.
Perfect. And I guess the other thing, so just in the interest of time, I don't know that we will have time to fully carve these spoons because they take quite a bit more time. But I wanted to share the basic techniques of how you might go about doing something that's a little bit more complicated and a little bit more sculptural. And so for that, I have my twig, and I'm just going to grab my preferred carving knife here. But you can use whatever you have on hand. If you have your kitchen knife, that would be perfectly fine.
So I brought in 2 twigs. One is pretty green and new, and one's a little bit older. What makes the ideal twig for whittling?
I would say that for a spoon, definitely the dry twig, the one that's a little bit older. But if you're looking just to practice, a green twig is going to be a lot softer and a lot more forgiving.
Okay.
But I'm going to start with my
little.
Yeah, you've got your little kitchen knife there. Perfect. So again, cutting away from ourselves. And the way that we do that when we're whittling, or the way that I like to do it, is that I put my thumbs together. And then you put the blade on the knife. And I don't push with my right hand at all. I push completely with my left thumb. So I'm just going to put it right here. And I'm going to push on the back of the knife with my left thumb and use that to drive the knife through the bark.
Oh, interesting.
And you'll notice that you have, if you just try to push with your right hand, at the end, you'll push, but you'll get a lot of flyaway. Yeah. And that's when really bad things can happen. So you want to move slow, and you want to work in little bites, take little bites, work very gradually, keep your thumbs together and cut away from yourself. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove all of the bark off of my twig here.
And are you doing it for a long piece, or are you doing it sort of for a spoon?
I'm doing it for a spoon-sized piece here.
When I was a kid, a distant relative whittled we were driving through Saskatchewan, and a relative whittled a little flute for me. And I just thought it was the coolest thing I had ever seen in my entire life. Cool.
I just saw a question there about Dremel tools. I will say that I do use Dremels from time to time, but I don't find them always to be the best tool for the way that I like to work. Very often I have these tools in my hand, which are, these are just small needle files. And so I have a variety of profiles of these. And I find that they do almost everything that a Dremel can. If I need to make a hole or a bowl in something, that is when I find a Dremel to be very useful.
Mm. And
So
Darlene, oh, sorry.
Oh, yes. No, go on, Jenna.
Just Darlene asking about your Etsy store name again.
Yes, Tom. So on Etsy, it's Tom Brown Creations.
Okay.
And so I've got my my twig nice and cleaned up here. I'm just going to show really quickly how I will split this twig or cut it off. So I'm going to go to the other end here, right around where my bark is. I'm going to set the twig flat on the ground or the work surface and just go around and cut in and just create a little chip, just like that, the whole way around. I'm going to try to get fairly deep into the stick, but I'm not going to cut it all the way off just yet because it's going to be an important handle to hold our stick.
Once you go around it once, do you go around again, or you just are going once?
Well, if you've got it deep enough, so I'll just hold it up here. So I've got mine, I would say it's approximately 1/2 centimeter in.
Okay.
But once you're about halfway through your stick going through, that's when I would stop. You want it to still be firmly attached, but you will be breaking it off at that point eventually.
Okay. Okay.
And so for myself, once I've completed that step, this is another step here. So we're just going to carve back into the spoon this way, and this will become the handle of our spoon. So we still have a nice place to grip the twig right here so that we can safely cut away from ourselves and just shape our handle. And this is, I find this is where the whittling really gets meditative. You can really take your time with this part. You can shape it to pretty much however you want. And I would really encourage people to do that. I find that whittling is, it's a bit of a lost art. It's very similar to knitting in a lot of ways. It's a little bit less, a little bit more dangerous. I think you can definitely poke yourself with a knitting needle, but I don't know that too many people are cutting fingers off with knitting needles. So I would implore you to be safe and to take it seriously. But I would also encourage you really to try it. And what I've done here is create a plane on the top of my spoon and just started to taper it towards the back this way, going down this way just to create a nice handle. And what I'm going to do, I'm actually just going to define where I want the paddle of my spoon to be in a very similar way to how we did this part. So I'm going to set my spoon down on the ground and just take small chips cutting into the wood, going around in a circle. Taking care not to break my spoon by putting downward pressure on it in the process. And I'm actually going to leave it intact on the top where I have my plane here. I'm not going to fully cut through. And then using those chips as a guide, I'm going to start continue carving the shaft of the spoon, the handle.
So when you have, I'm just going to reiterate that.
Yes.
For those of us who are trying to also not cut off their fingers on a live stream. So I have this little piece that I've started to clear out. The end of the branch is what's going to be the handle of my spoon.
Yes.
And so as I'm looking at the piece, I'm looking for where is going to be the paddle of my spoon.
Exactly, yeah.
Somewhere near this kind of notch that we've been making.
Exactly, yeah.
And then I'm going to start digging into it.
Exactly. Yeah, so very similar to how we created this circumferential sort of notch on the tip. We'll create another one that will define the size of the paddle of our spoon.
Okay.
So for me, it's about 1 centimeter.
Right. And are we talking bringing it in width-wise, or we're digging into what would be the bowl of the spoon now?
No, we're not going to dig into the bowl of the spoon yet. We're just bringing it in width-wise so that we can carve into the spoon essentially what we're doing here is we're splitting the grain of the wood.
Right.
So that when we carve, we're not going to split anything that's in the bowl out. So we're protecting the bowl of the spoon.
Okay, that's perfect. And I should just give a disclaimer here that the Globe and Mail is not responsible if you put up
me neither. Please be careful. But not too careful.
Okay. So notching. I think all summer we should all be sitting on our porches or front stoops or street corners, just whittling. If you do have an old timer's rocking chair that you can sit in, that's great.
And you know what a great, if you're not feeling comfortable with carving the wood, a really great thing to do is you can actually carve blocks of soap with just a butter knife. And that's a really great way to learn these whittling skills in a slightly lower stakes environment. But I'm going to show now another of the steps of how to work safely here. So eventually I'm going to want to carve back this way. And that is, as you will notice, my fingers are right here. So I am cutting towards myself. And there's kind of two ways of doing this safely in my mind. The first one is anchoring the bottom of the stick on your work surface vertically like that, just like this, holding it securely at the top and taking very gentle chips out, working down like this. So I'm working down and I'm cutting away from myself. Okay. Eventually, though, you will want to start to really remove detailed pieces, and you will cut towards yourself, but we're going to do it safely by using this, by locking our thumbs again. So we're going to lock our thumbs together. I'm going to anchor my right thumb on my left thumb, really resist with the left, and then take very small cuts working back this way, basically pivoting this thumb on this one. But this is really great because if you maintain this pivot, you can see that I'm working through the full range of essentially a slice back towards myself, and never at any point is that knife in danger of hitting my finger. So this is really the key to remember with whittling, is to keep those thumbs sort of firmly anchored together.
Okay. A question from Patrick. Any other suggestions of what to make with whittling?
I mean, the foremost and I would say most obvious suggestion is a marshmallow roasting stick. That is a really great way to practice your whittling skills. Spoons are really great things to carve because there's sort of an endless variation of different types of wooden implements that are used in cooking. If you're feeling really ambitious, you could try making a slotted spoon. You could try making a sort of more of a flat wooden spatula. I have made miniature bow and arrow before. That was quite a fun project. That was a little bit more sort of research based and experimental. That's a really good question, though. I guess actually maybe somebody watching here has some better ideas of other things, other small things that you can whittle. I know, Jana, you mentioned whistle. I don't know that I necessarily know how to make that, but it sounds really cool, and I would like to learn.
It had two pieces. It had almost like a slide whistle.
Interesting.
And if you had a bigger twig, presumably you could make, say, a little spoon for like jam or something. Like you could make a human-sized spoon using the same technique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that is something that's nice about working in miniature as well, is that the skills are transferable to larger scale projects as well. So we're not just learning how to carve miniature spoons right now. In theory, we are, we're making a real spoon.
Right.
So you can see that just as I'm working here, just how the spoon's kind of coming together. Mm-hmm. The shaft is, I like to work it into a bit of a rectangular profile. Just kind of helps you control the width and the shape of it. You can round out the corners later, or you can find the way that you like to work, but this is what I found works best for me.
And a question here, what did you use for the bristles on the mini broom?
They're bristles from a slightly larger broom that were at my studio, and so I just sacrificed a little bit of my my slightly larger, not quite a full-size broom. It was still a semi-miniature broom, but a functional one for clearing a desktop. But that is, that is sort of the challenge of working miniature as well, is finding the right material. So I don't know if I've got this piece on hand still. Yeah, here we go. The bowl of my espresso machine, the the portafilter. So we can see that right there. This piece, I spent so long looking for what would work. And what I ended up finding was this piece of a, what's the word I'm looking for here? I guess a ratchet set. And it just so happened that it perfectly fit inside of copper end, like a copper end cap for plumbing, which is what is forming the inside of the portafilter. So it really was just like finding every piece of metal that roughly resembled what I was looking for in my surroundings. And until I found the one thing that just so happened to be the perfect fit.
Wow. So here's a question from my friend Danny. Hi, Danny. And she's actually having the exact same problem that I have. She's saying that she has a little knot in the wood. How does she deal with that? I have that too. And so it's a little bit of a different texture, and it has, it's just a little bit.
Absolutely. So knots they are sort of the bane of the whittler's existence. And what I would say with the knot is that you actually need to work. So we're taking quite broad strokes, and you will have a buildup of wood around the knot. And what you need to do is, just starting at the top of the knot, you're going to just take the smallest slice of the knot that you can off. If you can cut across it. Maybe I'll actually try to demonstrate. So I've got a knot right here in my wood, and I'm going to see if I can take that off. But trying to cut across the top of it. And I've just taken a sliver off the top. I'm going to take another sliver, and I'm just going to keep slivering away at it, because if you try to take a big bite out of a knot, it's not going to let you. You have to take just really little bites and work your way down through it. But it will be a problem for the entire duration of you making that piece. That part of the wood will have a different texture, it will have a different grain, and you will have to make accommodations around it while you're working with it. It also helps to have a sharp knife for this part. So I don't know if the kitchen knife, it may be slightly too dull, in which case if you have an X-Acto knife kicking around your house, it will absolutely make short work of a knot.
So do you, when you're say you're looking for a twig, or you have a little twig, are you looking for what's a good spot on the twig that I can, like what's going to be the best spot to make a little spoon or whatever you're making, or do you just sort of start where you start?
Yeah, exactly. So you have basically you have nodes on your twig where other branches are growing out of, and you know that there's going to be a knot there, and then you have the spaces in between the nodes, which you're guessing are probably going to be relatively straight and clear grain. In this case, if you have a knot in the middle of your piece, really it's not the end of the world, but it will make the carving of your spoon considerably more difficult in that part of the spoon.
So
I see in this. Yes, go on.
I just switched to this larger knife, and I can tell that my kitchen knives need a little sharpened. So life got a lot easier all of a sudden for me by changing my tool.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. And my suggestion for everybody who's watching, for what to do with their miniature bowl, if you can try with sort of your leftover popsicle stick to make a flat paddled wooden spatula, and try making pancakes. Make 2 bowls, get your wet and your dry mixture. You can do it in a full-size pan, but make yourself some miniature pancakes, and I just invite you to have the experience of going through the whole thing of measuring it from beginning to end, doing all of the work, feeling like, feeling a little bit silly and absurd, and eating it with a tiny little pat of butter and a tiny amount of syrup. You could even carve yourself a little fork out of the wood. That would be another fine project for us to do here.
Well, that is a Craft Club challenge to all of you. I would love to see little miniature pancakes. And Tom, how do you scale down a recipe? I was noticing that with your pierogies. Some of us make full-size pierogies, and it can be hard enough to make your dough functional. So how do you scale down what you're going to make?
Well, it's pretty, I would say it's pretty one-to-one scaling a recipe down. You really can just divide it by a number to get the right amount, starting with your estimated quantity of flour. But I really find, and something that I didn't expect, I assumed that I would have to be ultra accurate. For example, working with leavening recipes and having the exact right amount of baking soda and the exact right amount of baking powder. And I found out that actually wasn't the case, that a miniature recipe is extremely forgiving. And so typically I just put some of everything in roughly the right quantities, and it tends to work, except when it doesn't. Just as I'm working.
Sorry?
Just as I'm working, when you're crossing the grain, so we can see right here that we've kind of gone down into the grain from this direction, but we've also gone down into the grain from this direction. And I've kicked up some some shavings here that if I were to continue carving them this way, it would take a run out of the wood this way, and likewise with this way. So I don't want to do that. What I'm going to do when I have those is actually just use my sandpaper and sand those off. Otherwise, we will potentially we will get tear out, and so we will tear the grain of the wood coming this way. So we'll use that just to sand down right at the, I guess, the juncture of our spoon there, the intersection of the grain.
I think that's what happened to me as I was just absentmindedly whittling while someone was talking. I sent a large chunk of my spoon flying off into oblivion. So I maybe...
That's how you learn.
I have to say, it may not be the most natural skill for me, but I find it extremely relaxing. I definitely do want to just go sit on my rocking chair on the front porch and whittle and yell at the kids to get off my lawn.
Absolutely.
A question from Joanne. This is a great question. Are some woods too hard or too soft to whittle?
I would say functionally no, but practically yes. So you were saying earlier, Jana, is there a better twig? And you had your green twig there. Often that won't work because the wood's just not developed enough. It's not dry enough, so it will just be too flexible. And then you will have a wood that is too hard. And you can whittle that wood, but it may not be pleasurable to. It may be quite hard. You won't be able to cut it nicely. You will need extremely sharp tools to work with it. I find a really nice middle point is twigs from spruce trees, which often have all kinds of dead wood underneath them, all kinds of dead branches that has a very tight grain. So you can see on this spoon right here, I don't know if we can see, shade the light, maybe we can see the grain on it at all, but it's quite a fine grain for such a small twig. And it's just very nice to work. It's hard enough, but it's not so hard that you're going to be blistering your fingers trying to carve white oak or hickory or maple or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And how long does it normally take you to make a fully finished spoon in this way?
I would say about an hour, but it's the type of thing that you can spend as much time as you want on, or as little time as you want. Mm-hmm. But for example, last night I did my trial run of carving a spoon here. This one took me about 45 minutes to carve. And I saw a question there about a stain or a coating to put on the wood. I like olive oil. I find that it's readily available. It will soak in nicely, and it will it will provide a nice finish. You can finish it other ways as well. I know wax is really nice too. If you wanted to wax your spoon, if you wanted to use something like a linseed oil, or a bit more of a sort of proper wood finish. But cooking oil will always do nicely just for giving wood a basic seal.
Mm-hmm. And so someone like me who has had a blowout, are you just kind of snapping it off and starting it again, or how do you deal with that?
You might be at that stage, Jana. Unfortunately, it might be a lesson learned in spoon carving. Unfortunately,
learning hard life lessons today here at Craft Club.
Exactly.
Okay. And so I do see we're about an hour and 20 minutes in. So, and you warned us that this probably wouldn't be able to be a finished product. But what should people be doing as they want to finish off the spoon?
Exactly. So just as we've been working, I've kind of profiled the handle of my spoon, and I've got it roughly to the point where I will want to take sandpaper to it next. So I'll smooth this surface out with sandpaper. For the bowl of the spoon, that will be a little bit trickier, but I can start working in with my knife, just with the very tip of it. I may even take, if you have the option, the smaller side. And the important thing is to define the walls of your spoon very well, and try not to cut into the walls of them at any point. So I've actually done an all right job of that with this one here. I haven't split the side at all. And this part you really will be patient with. So you'll want to remember that to cut away from yourself and just take, take very small pieces out of the bowl of the spoon. You can see just very small carvings. And as a final step, when you're finally ready to separate your spoon from the stick, we've made this notch already. And what we can do is we can go in from the other way, and you can cut that wood away quite easily. So we've got a narrowed section here, and then we can just create another set of notches all the way around. And for me, I usually find on my second set of notches that the spoon is pretty much ready to just be wiggled free.
Wow.
And this is nice because this gives you the basic profile of the tip of your spoon that is quite easy to shape using sandpaper, because this will be too difficult to carve. It will be too difficult to do it without cutting yourself, in my opinion. So to just sand the tip of your spoon and have more or less a finished product.
Yeah, we can absolutely visualize how that can be refined and to be a finished product. Well, this is just amazing. I can't wait to buy a really cute jackknife and spend my summer learning to whittle. This has been so interesting and just such a huge pleasure. A reminder to everyone that you can find more about Tom on his Instagram at Tom Brown Creates and explore all the work that he's done. I just so appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your skill with us. It's been really fun. And I do hope that my Craft Club people take that challenge seriously. I would love to see videos or photos of people making pancakes. I think that's an amazing idea, and I'm pretty tempted to do that myself. Huge thank to Patrick and Deb, who do all of our technical things. Today was like a dream somehow, no problems whatsoever. Thank you to all of you for joining us. It really is a pleasure and a highlight of my pandemic time to just craft with people and get to know them. I love seeing your pictures at home. Be sure to post them on our Facebook page, Globe Craft Club. And I look forward to seeing all of you May 25th for Baking with Rafikat. Until then, stay safe, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye, and thank you so much, everyone.